We're joined by the founder of Ascending Medicine, Dr. Genise Fraiman. For more than 20 years, she has shaped how modern medicine is practiced, co-founding one of Cedars-Sinai's leading hospitalist groups and helping define best practices for inpatient care across Los Angeles. She served on numerous boards mentoring young physicians and built deep ties across both hospital and outpatient networks.
We were taught to be really great at being reactive physicians, right? But if we can be proactive and take all of that knowledge and really change the trajectory, the tools that we have in our shed are obviously different than what we had 10, 15 years ago.
Welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast, where we simplify the complex world of precision medicine. We're here to explore how personalized healthcare can empower you to understand and improve your health to live a longer and healthier life. Join us as we break down the latest in medical science into actionable insights. Let's make precision medicine accessible and actionable for everyone. This episode is sponsored by Biography Health, where DNA-powered healthcare is designed just for you. Biography Health is a HIPAA-compliant precision medicine platform that equips providers with AI-driven recommendations powered by your genetics, health history, and clinical insights, all while keeping data private, secure, and independent from large EHR systems. If you're a provider ready to bring precision medicine into your practice, visit biographyhealth.com to learn more. Or if you're a patient who wants your doctor to explore this, point them our way. We'll help them bring personalized healthcare to life. As a reminder, this episode is for educational purposes only. This episode is in no way a replacement for professional health advice. Please consult with your professional primary care provider for medical advice. If at any point you feel that a topic discussed on our podcast was misrepresented, or if you have additional insights that could enhance our discussions, we wholeheartedly encourage you to reach out to us. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us improve and in ensuring our content remains both informative and reflective of the latest developments in precision medicine.
Man, it's so funny because I've heard so much about you two, and even just the history of how you two have been working together, even back at Cedars-Sinai. And so would love to know more background on that, how that all came about.
So he's probably one of the only guys I've ever approached first in my life. Actually, that is true. When I'm initially from upstate New York, and I moved out here because I met my husband at a conference at Cedars-Sinai. And so he was a fellow, and I had just finished residency, and I was mobile when I found myself in LA. And long story short, I initially started working for Kaiser, and it was not the right fit. And I found myself 8 weeks later with no job, a apartment for rent, a car lease, and I had to figure something out. So I started doing locum tenens, where I was a hospitalist in Fresno, and I would spend a week in Fresno and then drive back to LA for a week because I wasn't engaged, I wasn't married, and I had no friends out here. So I was doing shifts on and off for about a year when I met other physicians, and long story short, I was approached to become a physician as part of the founder for an IPA, a large group, be one of 3 physicians that would take care of thousands of lives. And I really didn't know anything about the business of medicine, which is when I went to my, at that time, I think he was my fiance, who's still not my husband. And I asked him, and he said, I don't know whether you want to do this, but there's this gentleman who I trained with in residency. His name is William Stanford. Perhaps you want to give him a call. So I honestly did. I cold called Bill, and I introduced myself, and we went out to dinner. And essentially he said to me, no way, run for the hills. You don't want to be in IPA position, but I've been working 365 days covering one group as a hospitalist. Would you want to be my vacation coverage so I could breathe for a weekend? So I said, sure. And that was 21 years ago.
Yeah, 2004. Right?
2004. So it was the two of us, and we decided to conquer hospital medicine and essentially build an incredible group that took care of all the private physicians in the community. And we would take care of their patients from the time they arrived at Cedars till the time they left. And then we just built from 2 to 3 to 5 to 8, and it kept going. That's how we did. It's like my brother.
Wow. How'd you get into concierge medicine? Tell that story a little bit.
So that was, now over 10 years ago. Wow, we're really dated. So as we continue to grow the group, we obviously had challenges growing it, just scaling it to date and finding the right place and practicing the way we wanted to. And I remember 10 years ago approaching you saying, I think I've learned all that I can in our current situation. And it was time to navigate and look elsewhere. And at that time, one of my friends, who happens to now be my old partner, had transitioned from another type of medicine into concierge medicine and had offered to expose me to outpatient concierge medicine. And I was a little reticent, to be perfectly honest, because you know how long it took us to build the group. I mean, 24/7 for 10 years, and to leave kind of your baby when you built it. It's a little nerve-wracking, but I decided to take the leap, and
Those were
that was
hard years. I just want that on record. Those were hard.
those were hard years. But if you can get through that, I feel like you can get through almost anything. And here we are now, literally 20 years later, our kids now in college. I remember when they were both born. So that's how long we've known each other.
So within those hard years towards the end, as you're like starting to transition, did that further influence the urge to then go into concierge medicine even more? Like, were there specific, like what made it far? Like, what
What I found was, the reason why I thought our group as a hospitalist group was special is we had unbelievable relationships with not just the providers, but with a lot of the patients who were what we would call frequent flyers. They had chronic medical conditions that would line them back and forth up in the hospital again. So they would get to know us. And I'll never forget one patient who I took care of. I still remember her name, where 2 years after she passed, her son sent me flowers downstairs. Remember, it's the lobby is always, okay? Yeah. Right? Cynthia Schoenhall, right? And I was so moved, and I thought to myself, wow, I really want to have the opportunity to build those relationships with my patients. And that was probably the largest impetus for me transitioning out more into an outpatient setting where I get to know the patients in every aspect, their family, what they love, what they hate, where they vacation. And you really couldn't do that very well for the short amount of time that they were in the hospital.
Yeah, because that is one thing that I've noticed on like other calls that we've been on is like how passionate you are about your patients. And like you can even tell when like you protect your patients and you really get down and into like knowing and making sure that they're well taken care of.
Well, what I found is I've been on all sides. I've been the patient, I've been the physician, I've been the family member. And it's a really horrible feeling to feel helpless in any of those situations, right? And so if you can what I try and do is think, if this was my family or this is someone I love, what would I do? Why would I do it? And what makes sense? And then have a conversation, because what I think may make sense for me may not make sense for you or sense for him, but it comes down to honestly building a relationship and taking that personalized journey with this specific patient. And the only way you can do that, honestly, is time.
And in the current medicine 2.0, so to speak, insurance-based system, I mean, you may only have 15 patients seeing 30 patients a day. It's not like, tell me what's going on with you. It's more like, tell me exactly why you came in today, and only that.
15 minutes. The first 4 are done by the medical assistant, charting you, look at the vitals. You barely have time to even speak or look at the patient because you have to document to then move on to the next patient. It has nothing to do with how intelligent the physician is. Really, it comes down to a time crunch. And then patients feel like they're rushed and they really can't even address half of the issues that are concerning them. That's why I do what I do.
And who left first? Did you leave first to start BHI? Oh,
I left first.
Oh, interesting.
I left.
She broke our hearts.
I know. In fairness, I said to him, here's our group. I leave with my reputation. Like, we built it together, and I wouldn't trust anyone but him to continue the group. And whatever he chose to do with our group that we built was ultimately his decision. And no, but I felt like I had learned so much, and those experiences were invaluable, and I used them every day. The way that I look at patients, my mind sometimes goes to the worst case scenario and then moves back to the best case scenario, just because I've had all of those years of exposure. So those sleepless nights have paid off.
Thousands and thousands of patient encounters with people in the most extreme situations, and that's what makes Dr. Fraiman pretty uniquely qualified.
Qualified. So we're
seen it all.
dating me again.
And so then how did you two, like once you left, then how did you two then reconnect? And then when did you start, like reconnect with Dr. Stanford, learning more about his practice then?
So Bill has always been my brother. He's my brother. He's been my friend. His wife is one of my very good friends. We're basically family. And so just because I left the group and transitioned to outpatient medicine didn't change our friendship or our bond. So we've stayed close literally since 2004. Every step along the way as he was transitioning and reinventing himself, I was reinventing myself, and we were working, in parallel versions, right? But it's not as if we ever lost touch or sight of the fact that we would likely work again together at some time. I would ask him his thoughts on certain cases without sharing names. He would ask me what I would think about precision medicine and would it ever be something I would be interested in. And so we just have grown, and now we find ourselves actually getting to really work again together, which is incredible, and share patients. And I've learned so much from him, and I'm super excited because I think it's such a great avenue for our patients. Really, the reason why I love medicine is it's dynamic, and I learn something every day. I also feel stupid every day and know that there's so much more that I can learn. But what we can do now, even 6 years ago, it's just the difference is incredible.
And one thing I have to say, and even just in the interaction before we hit record on camera, is like you ask questions. Like you really want to get down to knowing and understanding what your patients would be going through. And I respect that because it's like you want to make sure that you understand it first in order for your patients to understand it. And really, I guess, make sure that your patients are getting the best care possible using the science of today.
I think you have to realize that there's the business of medicine, then there's the art of medicine, and then the science of medicine. And how do those three intersect and what makes sense? Just because we can, does it mean we should? Not necessarily. And if we're going to do something, why are we doing it? And can we do it in a thoughtful way that's tailored to you specifically?
Yeah, that was great.
And so I feel like that's a very personalized conversation with this specific patient or individual, because your desires may look completely different than Bill's or mine. Excuse me one second, I'm going to get the sentences. So I need to understand these tests because there are, thousands of new tests rolling out almost on a weekly basis. And some of them, in my opinion, have true scientific data behind them. Others, maybe not as much, and some none. However, the marketing is amazing. Excuse me. What?
No, okay, good.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, wrong.
Sorry about the medication. Can you pause?
That's what it is. You're great. You're good.
Hi.
Okay, we're good. Go ahead.
Do you think having that front row seat, best view to the end result of chronic illnesses, people waning up in the hospital, do you think that had something to do with your leaning heavily into wellness and longevity?
I think so. I think that if I can avoid, not just for my patients, but for me and my friends and my family, ever having to get there or getting there much later and having a greater health span that goes along with perhaps a longer lifespan, ultimately that's our goal. Like we were taught to be really great at being reactive physicians, right? But if we can be proactive and take all of that knowledge and really change the trajectory, isn't that the name of the game now?
Yeah.
And then if we have to be reactive, the tools that we have in our shed are obviously different than what we had 10, 15 years ago. And arguably, even the outcomes, thankfully, sometimes are significantly better. However, if I can prevent the Alzheimer's from developing, even in myself, that's a win as far as I'm concerned.
I just have one kind of follow-up question to that. Just Why do you suppose that they don't recommend starting DEXA scans for bone mineral density till like after menopause? What sense
I have
does
no
that?
idea. I mean, I think they say, okay, estrogen is protective on your bones, but the truth be told is your peak bone density, especially as a female, is in your early to mid 20s. So unless you're doing some type of ongoing regular activity where you're loading those bones with some degree of weight resistance and resistance training, whether it's HIIT and using light weights, any type, you're still on that slope, slowly declining, maybe not a steeper slope, right? When you lose your estrogen protection. I think it comes down to a cost benefit analysis. And I will also say one other thing. The treatments we have, the current treatments for osteoporosis, they all have a certain shelf life, right? So if I have osteoporosis at 52 and I need Prolia or I need a bone stimulating agent, a PTH analog, I can use it for 5 years. I can use it for 2 years. The other one I could use for 3 years. But then what do I do after that, right? So one can make an argument, once again, is if we're doing this test, why are we doing it? And where is the actionable item to follow? So if I was going to do a DEXA scan in a healthy 26-year-old who showed osteopenia, and that would be what would convince him or her to actually change their lifestyle, make sure they eat a healthy lifestyle with great nutrients, and start doing true exercises that would be beneficial, that's a well-intended scan. If it was someone just marching in to do a checklist off, like check this off, and they do nothing with it, that's a waste of resources as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's a great point.
But that's why I think so.
But I think in the medicine of the future, patients are going to take far more agency over what they do and how they interact with their healthcare.
I also think the way we approach medicine has significantly changed, right? You look at my parents who they're incredibly educated. They still never want to bother the doctor, right? Anything the doctor says, now they're doing a little more reading. And like I said, they're both, higher, probably some higher education. Their aptitude is significantly high. And yet I think it was the old school teaching that quote unquote, the doctor knows best, or only bother the physician when there's something wrong, as opposed to preventing that illness from occurring. So I think we are going to find that as we're discussing it more, whether it's you and I in person or over the internet or in a number of different ways, the education is front and center. And I think that's what we're going to see in our kids' age. My kids never come to me and ask me a question and take it at face value. Do yours?
No, I'm sure they go straight to the AI.
But what's funny about this, though, is that both of your kids were literally on the podcast talking about how they wanted to be proactive about their health.
Right.
Yeah.
My Lexi specifically has asked me very difficult questions about her health based on our genetics, specifically about my medical history, and I'm happy to discuss any about if you want to, if other people can learn from my journey and why I think precision medicine would have been extremely helpful for me 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And what I've said to her is her options may be significantly different from mine, and she will have a lot more information to make an educated decision, because the one thing we can't change is our genetics. We can change what we do about them, and maybe with polygenic risk scores, and we change how we choose, whether it's the exercise, live our life, optimize our sleep, the outcome from what we may be genetically predisposed to develop, she will have that opportunity. I'm quite hopeful that it will change.
Well, do you want to talk about your journey?
Sure.
No, it is really interesting because really before we even, what you experienced and the decisions you made occurred pre-DNA sequencing, right?
Some of them did and some of them didn't. So we can go back to, my late 30s. I'm, one of 3 children. My eldest sister is a year and a half older than me. And she called me at 39 and said, I have a mammogram I want you to see. And she sent me her mammogram report. And I called her back and I said, you need to see a breast surgeon. You have breast cancer. And she thought I was exaggerating. And I said, you need to see a breast surgeon. And I scheduled her an appointment. And unfortunately, she wound up having breast cancer at age 39. At the same time, within 3 months, my 36-year-old cousin, first-degree cousin, was diagnosed with breast cancer, 3 little kids. Subsequently, she passed away 2 years later from breast cancer. And so I found myself with, a first-degree cousin and my sister, both of them having early age onset breast cancer with, no genetic history per se.
Right. So no single gene like the BRCA or Paul B2 right? Or none of that.
Right. So at that time, I think there were 5 genes that they could test for, and all 5 were negative. The BRCAs were negative. And so, you're looking at a decision tree as a female who is still under 40. I had 2 little kids, 11 months apart, working full time, a husband who arguably works 1.5 times. And what do we do about my genetic risk factors? So I decided to educate myself. I went to 3 different genetic counselors within the Beverly Hills, Los Angeles area. And each genetic counselor gave me a different lifetime percentage of my risk of breast cancer.
Just based off the family history?
Based off the family history and based off that 5 gene panel, I was quoted anywhere from 15% to 49% lifetime risk. That's a huge variability.
Sure.
And as you're going through that, you then obviously undergo screening mammograms sooner than your 40-year age recommendation. And every time you get a mammogram that they see something, it's followed by an ultrasound that's then followed by a biopsy. So I then found myself at age 39.
They biopsy usually before an MRI, or would they do MRIs?
At that time, they were not doing MRIs. Okay. So the first 2 biopsies came pre-MRI. The third one came post-MRI. And it was 3 biopsies later, and anything that may have looked partially suspicious that they may have not called suspicious, given my family history, would then be biopsied. So here I am at age 39, having undergone 3 biopsies, starting an MRI, and being a physician at Cedars, unfortunately or fortunately, and a lot of people know me. And I have a family history of vasovagal syncope, and I found myself twice in the radiology core having my IV placed for my MRI, and I had a vasovagal episode. So I found myself saying, Dr. Fraiman, and here I am, like, being revived before I undergo the MRI machine. So, I really had to think long and hard about whether I was going to be proactive and undergo a prophylactic mastectomy, knowing that I was looking at a lifetime of biopsies, a lifetime of MRIs, and whether gadolinium affects your kidneys or doesn't affect your kidneys. That's a whole nother discussion.
I mean, it's a heavy metal at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, and you're young, okay? I'm still young. And so I decided to finally, with a lot of discussion, undergo a bilateral prophylactic mastectomy at age 40. I think
And the only information you had, this is the interesting part, is that it was somewhere between 15, which is a little more than average. I mean,
right.
Average is what,
exactly.
9%?
Yeah.
And, to 4 times half.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you take the same information and have that range? Yeah. Okay, like you just throw a poll and say, me at 32.
Because the unanswered question that can be answered now is how much of that risk did you inherit?
Right. So if I had the information that what I have now, it would have made my decision-making process in my mind much simpler. I wouldn't have questioned myself. I think women, maybe men too, look, this is your body. And, I certainly don't want to undergo a major surgery, which has psychological,
Sure.
challenges, for lack of a better word, if I wasn't 100% sure that this was the right decision. If I only had the information available to me then, I think it would have been significantly less agonizing to make that decision. Once I finally made the decision, going through it was actually the easier of the two, but the agony of making the decision with that information, if God forbid my daughter ever has to make it, I think the process will be much gentler for her.
And the point is that, the vast majority of breast cancers that seem to occur in an inherited pattern are not associated with a single gene.
That's right.
And as you described, those genes we've known about since 1985, 1990, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But now you can look at all the other genes. You can do whole genome sequencing.
That's the problem too, because the more you look, the more we found.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so, you move on from breast cancer to Alzheimer's, and that's another example. Just for my own self, we have a huge family history of Alzheimer's on my father's side. My grandfather had it, my uncle had it, and the concern for my dad is obviously would he develop it, which is why he's still working at 78. And unfortunately, I have the APOE variant, and that's something that you and I discussed. And knowing that
We have in common.
and we have in common, what can I do with my lifestyle to change that trajectory, knowing that I'm at an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's? And so I exercise religiously 5 to 6 days a week. I watch everything I eat. I have talked to you about perhaps microdosing a GLP-1 to prevent the inflammatory cascade, right? And most recently, you and I have had the conversation about undergoing a sleep study,
Right.
which I did. Okay.
You did a sleep
I
study?
did. I haven't talked to you since then, and I failed it miserably. So I'm 110 pounds, like 5'3.5". I think if my body percent fat is 17%, and I failed my sleep study miserably.
Perfect. I say that again.
Surprise.
Yeah. Well, some of the people with the worst sleep apnea out there are thin. Being thin is not protection against sleep apnea. And if you're someone like us that is at increased risk for cognitive decline, getting your sleep right is job one.
So the interesting part was I used to think my poor sleep hygiene or sleep disorder was due to all those years ago constantly being on the pager 24/7. Literally, it would ring all night long. So I just thought I had light sleep because I was kind of programmed to make sure I would wake up for the pages. And so after you do that for a decade, and then you raise 2 little kids and have 2 babies 11 months apart, you never really sleep. So I just thought I had poor sleep from, honestly, myself just
history of
right?
disordered sleep.
Okay, so, right, my sleep study proved me wrong.
Perfect. So what are you doing about it?
So we ordered the CPAP machine, which it has not arrived yet.
Are you doing the pillows?
I'm going to try the pillow. I definitely can't tolerate the mask. I know myself, I can't, but I will try the pillow because the truth be told is when I saw my heart rate variability, I don't DSAT, but I certainly have heart rate variability. You see the spikes, and then I wake up, and it falls along with everything I notice. I start waking up at 3 in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you see the spike. You just can't ignore the data.
And you think actually at the time, relate my experience with this sleep study, you think you haven't fallen asleep.
No, I thought I was awake.
And they go, oh no, you fell asleep. You just fall asleep for like 5-10 seconds and you wake up again. 5-10 seconds, you wake up again.
Yeah, there were so many spikes, it almost looked like a continuous line. It was sad.
Yeah. I got it.
So that was last week.
Your life's about to change.
Let's hope for the better.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. If I can tolerate it, which the truth be told is, I think that is a conversation that I try to have with myself and then with my patients, because I think CPAP is one of those areas that are very a lot of you swear by it,
Yeah.
but a lot of people shy away from it because it's uncomfortable and it changes your lifestyle dramatically. And so if there's a way that
doesn't.
well, and some people say it dies, okay?
You
But
put the thing on and go to sleep.
if there's a way to, whether it's using some pharmacological agents, whether it's melatonin, to help me adjust to it initially so I get used to it almost like anything else, I think the challenge is partially in my mind, and then realizing that it's like anything else. You put your time and you slowly work at it, and it may take 6 weeks, it may take 8 weeks to get used to it and comfortable with it. So instead of sleeping 30 minutes, I say 45 minutes. But the truth be told is, I'm really not sleeping that much to begin with. So that's how I'm going to try and approach it in the next 2 weeks when it comes.
And of course, if you fail the CPAP altogether, you maybe Inspire. Any of your patients try that? It's really expensive.
I think it's been a mixed bag. I have had one patient who actually went one step further, who had the jaw surgery, right? The jaw surgery. I think Inspire, I do think, is loaded as well. I think that it may work for a period of time, and then as you age, I don't know if it works as well. I'm not the expert on that data. I'll say that my patients who have used CPAP and, like you, have really embraced it and incorporated it in their lives, they don't go anywhere without it. I haven't had one person I did have one person who did Inspire who's been happy. And the other person who did the surgical correction is extremely happy, but that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. Do you remember taking care of those patients post-op in the hospital? They're scary. So scary.
Yeah.
I mean, they just had an operation on their airway, and they're just stuffed full of gauze and everything.
Horrible. It's so horrible.
And then you're just imagining, gosh, if that wound opens up tonight, man, speaking of no sleep, if you're the person taking care of that person. Anyway.
Get a primary nurse at night.
Hospital medicine war stories. Okay.
So
I wanted to back up just a little bit, because what I was impressed with just in hearing the story was the amount of due diligence that you did in the front end to be able to like kind of figure out what your baseline was. And then you were able to go down this line of just what these recommendations were, et cetera, getting to that sleep study. You made a comment a little bit earlier, though, about how there was a lot of, let's say, tests or information out there that could also not be so trustful, and BS, maybe in the form of charlatans way. And so I was wondering if you two can dive into that more and really being able to like vet what is actually out there, because from a consumer standpoint, it seems like there is a bunch of stuff that's almost saying the same thing. Like everyone's saying longevity and wellness, which is great, but I feel like there's so much nuance to that more patients should understand as to like how to sift through that.
You want to crack it in first?
That's you.
I think it's very difficult as a consumer, whether you're on your computer, you're on your TV, you're listening to a podcast where there's an ad. There's always an ad for something, whether it's a medical device, a supplement, stem cells, exomes, about longevity. And that's the latest buzzword, right? There's a longevity clinic at every corner. And I will tell you that I don't necessarily believe that everything has to be FDA approved, because I think that takes 10, 20 years. And by the time some of these things are FDA approved, like it's already the horse has left the gate per se, right? That being said, I think I try to do my due diligence in vetting whether it's an imaging center or a supplement. All supplements are not created equal. Look at melatonin for a perfect example. You go to CVS, there's like 20 versions of melatonin on 1/4 of a shelf. You go back to CVS a week and a half later, you buy the same bottle. You don't know it's the same formula within that same bottle. It looks the same. It says it's the same. There's no regulation for it whatsoever. And so you do see that with different supplements. So I think it's really important for me that and because I'm trained in Western medicine, many times I work with other individuals who are trained more in naturopathic medicine to combine the worlds, just like I combine precision medicine with Dr. Stanford because I think he's the best and the most knowledgeable at that. So I try to build teams for our patients and actually collaborate so I can learn and then pass along that information and make the best choice for you. Because I do think whether it's glutathione, I mean, we could bring up a million of them, right? There's a million versions of what the best supplement should be on. What's the best turmeric for you, right? If you look at a list, and we just did this last week when I was at your house,
Exactly.
right? As we're doing these reports, we were looking at me and we were typing it into AI saying, okay, if you have this APO3E variant, what are the best supplements? And 6 of them pop up. And of the 6 of them, he looks at me and he asks, how many are you taking? And I said, that would be 1. And that is how the conversation started. And so as we looked at the other 5 supplements, I then wanted to know the reasoning behind why this supplement would be helpful and whether it's inhibiting oxidative stress, right? Or apoptosis, like why are they recommending those supplements? And then if those supplements make sense, is there a reason why I should or I shouldn't be taking them? And then moving on to the next step, what is the best brand to take those supplements that have the least byproducts, to be perfectly honest, and additives,
I mean, yeah.
right?
So that, or actually contains what it says it contains.
Right. So that's how I do it.
I think you have to look at the holistic approach, which is to see where the risks are and target there. I mean, you could probably make a rationale for 100 different supplements.
How many patients do you and I share where we have individuals that come in and they say, oh, I only take 4 medicines. So they take 4 medicines and then you ask them, how many supplements? Oh, I take 23 supplements. I kid you not. And you look at that and you say, wow, 23 supplements. How do you keep them all? And they walk in with these baggies full of 23 supplements that they take throughout the day. And you ask them, why do you take all these supplements? Oh, I don't know. I saw it on Instagram and they said it was good. And so it's doing a deep dive into all of those supplements. Why are you using them? What are we trying to get out of the supplement? And does it make sense for you to continue taking them? And most importantly, are they harming you in any way?
I think this is a perfect place to now comments then, especially with ChatGPT and AI being can be a very useful resource, but then also dangerous as well, because now you have a bunch of patients that are trying to do it themselves and just...
It's training the AI, I found. It's training the AI.
It's engineering.
Right, to ask the right questions. I may not even know what the right question is, but I know when I see the answer, it's not the answer I'm looking for. And it makes me then pivot to another question to get to the answer. So many times I will do that because otherwise I'm not utilizing the resources we have.
Right.
And, especially when he'll give me a genetic report and I think, okay, what does that really mean? And I honestly will put it in ChatGPT and start reading, formulate my question, and then I come back to you.
Do you encourage your patients to use it as well? If they take the initiative and then want to go down that, there was a big sign. Oh, I can't wait.
So many times I think it's whenever I talk to a patient and I ask them, what are your health goals? Like, what are we trying to accomplish in the first quarter? What are we trying to accomplish in this next year? And how can we get there? And what are you looking to do? Right? And we have all of these tools at our disposal. And if we're going to do, let's say, a full body MRI, why are we doing it? What facility are we doing it at? And, are we going to review this before you actually get the report from the imaging center? Because a full body MRI is a perfect example. It can be very anxiety provoking and it can be extremely useful. It's a tool that if used correctly, I think is an
Yeah, that's a perfect
tool.
analogy. Yeah, I think the heavy side was I enjoy doing AI searches with my patients. I help them craft that question, or I'll craft the question and say, just look at these trusted sources, and you tell the AI where to look, or please give references, and you can look at what it's based on. But I think that the vast majority of patients wouldn't know how to style a question like that.
Yeah.
And so the AI is just scraping the internet, and there's a lot of garbage out there, right?
Can hallucinate it.
Well, and hallucinating, but reading the Inquirer when you wanted to be reading the journal Nature, you know what I mean?
Right.
So kind of like that.
Well, and it goes back to your point. Then it's like knowing what you're looking for and knowing when that isn't what you're looking for to be able to to change the prompts.
My philosophy is when something doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. So we need to dig deeper and see. And sometimes I'll dig and I'm literally at the bottom of a pit that I dug and I still can't find it. And I've sent several patients for medical mysteries with binders, okay? And they've gone to tertiary care centers for rare diseases and they've come back saying with a very similar workup with no answers. Sometimes we find there are no answers or we just don't know what they are yet, but it's not going to be for lack of looking, right? I'm looking in a thoughtful way where, can we do something about this? Or is there something that perhaps we're missing that maybe or someone else who thinks in a similar fashion, like they're doing another search. And somewhere along the line, that's where I think AI is incredible because that can connect me to Singapore or Italy, where, the ESES expert for, seizures, that's where the papers are. So I think it's a fantastic tool. It's no different in my mind when you say encouraging patients to use AI. If I'm going to do an investment, you would hope I would know a little bit about the company I want to invest in. Now, I'm not going to know as much as my financial planner, but I would love my patients to have an understanding and a beginning and come in with their concerns as opposed to not addressing them at all.
Well, speaking of, I like that. I like that analogy because now I want to dive into just like ascending medicine and what y'all represent and even how you met Dr. Monsif too. Because this is also as I'm learning about this space more within different concierge models and different practices, there's either one doctor or there's a pair of doctors. And so I'm just kind of curious if there were like complementary like skill sets or if there was the same alignment of vision and interests. And
so when you meet Dr. Monsif, or you've already met her, we're very similar in many ways and very different in other ways. I've known Hengame for over a decade. Our girls were best friends in elementary school and continue to be best friends.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that? So I met Lexi, who's going to be 20 this summer, became Maya's best friend in kindergarten. That's Hengame's younger daughter. So I have known Hengame for many years.
Wow.
That being said, Hengame hails from the east side of Los Angeles and is well-versed in hospital medicine. She was part of a large group at Huntington Memorial and just finished being the head of the medical executive committee meeting. And so we used to collaborate throughout the years on cases just like you and I did. We would run ideas back and forth. And so when I decided to leave my prior concierge group and open ascending medicine, I approached her and asked whether she would ever want to join me and build this practice together. And so that's how ascending medicine came to fruition.
Yeah, because one thing that I did notice, at least like within some of our listeners too, is we have some doctors that are also looking to start their own practice, their own concierge practice. And so for those that are listening that are thinking about it, do you have any advice for that?
I would say whether it's a concierge practice, a fee-for-service practice, just be true to yourself. You have to really be true to yourself, especially in the landscape of where we currently are. I think, look, I'm not the physician for every patient, right? Nor is my partner. I think it comes down to the relationships that you build with your patients and where they feel most comfortable. And if you're starting out any type of practice, you have to realize that I have failed more than I've succeeded, right? Like you remember all those times? I mean, I would sleep on the DEXA scan. I would sleep in the ER. Every single nursery to build the practice and, our old practice. And sometimes it took longer than we would have wanted to. And then we found ourselves so busy we couldn't keep up with the number of patient referrals we had. So you have to be able to go with the ebbs and flows, knowing that things don't always follow the trajectory that you intended or hoped for, but realize that if you are true to yourself and you practice the way you feel comfortable practicing in an honest, transparent way, the practice will come.
Wow.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I think the current insurance-based reimbursement way that medicine is practiced is, routinely, it's like impossible. These prior authorizations, most of the doctors I know that are working in that paradigm, that business model, are very unhappy, and it's not fulfilling. It's not what they came to do. So I would encourage people to do it, but to plan, we were discussing the other day, plan ahead, put processes in place, start small, don't get desperate, just, keep your costs down and focus on the patient, and the patients will come.
Now, speaking of the patients then, how do I want to frame this question? Because within my network, right, and just people that I've spoken with, a lot of them are just going through insurance, and at what point then does it make sense? Is it I don't want to say it's financial to then make the investment to go towards
It is a financial investment. It absolutely is a financial investment. But you invest in lots of things. You invest in a vacation, you invest in a home, you invest in a car. Everyone chooses the priorities. It doesn't really matter how much money you have, but it is an investment in your health. And with that, it does become a financial investment. Let's be honest here. I mean, the truth be told is, like I said, if you saw a physician for 8 minutes because you have a 15-minute visit, so you're actually seeing the physician for 8 minutes, I would be highly impressed if most patients got all their questions answered, felt comfortable about the visit, and knew that they could reach their physician at any time they needed to in case of an emergency. That would be incredible. Except for, unfortunately, that's not how it works.
At all.
Which is sad.
It's
really
very sad. It's very sad. I really feel like, unfortunately, here it's become a two-tiered system. It really has, and it's going to continue to be that way. And I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Well, call me the eternal optimist. I think that the system is so broken now, I wouldn't be surprised if some disruption comes along. I don't know.
I agree with that. I just don't know what that looks like in the time frame that it does, right? Something has to change because it's broken. It's not working for the masses. It's working for very few.
It basically needs to move back toward market forces. Patients are spending healthcare dollars, obtaining their healthcare through the insurance and reimbursement system. There's no reason why they can't spend their dollars in a different way. And it's just that when Genise started doing, very much a pioneer, we're kind of underappreciating also that when Genise made that leap, it was a very, uncommon, maybe 1 in 100 doctors were attempting to do what she's doing, even in the LA area. But I think if patients were empowered somehow to spend the dollars that they're already spending in a way that suits them, that they have some agency in this, I think it will look a whole lot different. And I actually think it is going to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised that within 10 years, and this is the boldest prediction you'll hear this week, that there'll be collapse
Maybe 10 years.
At some point of the commercial insurance, health insurance, because they can't make money at it because they can't do well. The patients aren't doing well. The weight of the whole thing is reaching a critical mass. And patients are inching out and looking at alternatives of direct.
Well, let's be honest here. If I can just add this. I have health insurance. You have health insurance. I do not think one of my providers takes my highest level PPO. Not one of them. They all are out of network
Oh.
or fee for service because they can't afford to take a Blue Cross Gold plan that I have. So whether you have great health insurance or not, I feel like that's almost insurance for, God forbid, hospitalization, and not much more than that right now, especially in the area that we choose to practice, because physicians can't afford to keep their doors open.
And often, with critical tests like a coronary CT angiogram, if it's billed through insurance, I don't know what it's.
No, I'm still paying for that out of pocket. Here's a perfect example. That's another one in my precision medicine test, right?
Right. But often when you pay cash for a medical service, the cost is similar to the copay as if you were paying with insurance.
There's a cash price, and then there's the insurance price because they have a facility fee and a negotiated rate. And the truth be told is I can pay $1,500 for my coronary artery CT scan, which I do now need to get, even though my CAC score was 0. This is what we were just talking about before this podcast. Okay. And it doesn't matter whether I have insurance or not, because I can go through insurance and likely they'll deny it and then you'll appeal it. You're spending all of this time wasted. And I'm still going to wind up.
And even if they cover it, the copay could be, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and maybe not that much less than if you just said, okay, what if I just pay cash? How much is it?
Something that came up in a previous conversation offline was there was this patient that was talking about they were worried about taking some, like, knowing a little bit more, like, let's say, like, doing whole genome sequencing, having all of this data. There's this fear that insurance companies then are going to sort of use that against them. Then have you seen?
Well, I see that. I haven't seen that, but I hear that quite a bit. And I have to be honest, with the amount of data that's out there, I don't think it's a crazy concern. I think if you do certain testing, you do it where you are assigned a number where no one, knows that your number is attached to your name. And I think that gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you protection as far as that concern, but it doesn't prohibit you from getting, albeit, sometimes critical information that you wouldn't have gotten had you not undergone some of these tests. There is a workaround, but I don't think that theory is a crazy theory.
Yeah.
No, well, I lean into privacy and security. So in my practice, the patient's name never leaves my practice. It's a medical record number and date of birth.
Right. Yeah, because there's also then the fear too, is like employers might not want to employ you just because they know that of X, Y, and Z.
And I don't want my patient's genetic information getting on Epic.
Right, exactly.
So I use Biography Health. I use Biography Health, siloed by design, nothing in, nothing out, anonymized. And
that's why we don't chart on these large EHRs, because I don't want anyone who ever logs onto Epic to see my patient's information. It's no one's business aside from the patient's. And if they want to share it, and they're treating physicians as far as I'm concerned.
And as far as genetic information goes, it supposedly, by law, can't be used against you for purposes of obtaining health insurance or employment, but it can be used to deny you life insurance or long-term care insurance.
Right. If you've ever applied for life insurance, you have to fill out? The questionnaire is this big, and then they don't even believe your physician, so they come over and do their own assessment and draw their own labs, so there's no confusion that there would be a bait and switch that they would get someone else's blood work.
And they do ask if you've had genetic testing.
Yes, they do.
And I've had patients actually, the reverse is they go, I want you to give that analysis to my life insurance company because I think they said if I do that, I'll get a lower rate.
So for patients that are out there that are listening, that aren't in your areas, but still want to find a practice, a doctor, providers like yourselves for themselves, like within their area, how would you advise them on going about to try and find that partner for them?
That's where I think the internet would be an invaluable resource. I would Google personalized medicine,
Okay.
and you're gonna have to filter a lot through
Okay.
it and read through the weeds, right? But the truth be told is, if you're doing your initial search, it's no different than searching for good flights for your next upcoming trip, right? You have a general idea of what you want, you narrow it down, and then you hone in, and then you interview the physician and the office and see whether you feel comfortable there.
Yeah, I can tell you it's a small handful of people that I would refer to do the thing that I do. One person, Melinda Masser, you always hear me talk about her. She's MD, PhD, or PhD's in genetics, and she's at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and has set up a precision medicine institute. And why do I mention her? It's like 4 or 5 people that would have, that depth of knowledge and genetics as applied to an internal medicine type practice. It's very uncommon, but it'll be much more common soon. And what we really like to do is empower practices like Ascending Medicine somehow to adopt precision medicine on block, and that's possible through what we're doing and how we work together.
That's our goal, is to make it affordable, more affordable than it used to be, right? So we can offer it to more patients, and it really can change the trajectory of their health span.
I love it.
That's why it's so great to be sitting next to both of you.
And if anybody wants to reach out to you, Dr. Fraiman, reach out to Ascending Medicine, what is the best way that they can reach out to you?
The probable best way is for them just to Google our website, and the contact information will pop right out.
Okay. And those will be in the show notes as well. Dr. Fraiman, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was an honor. And of course, thank you, Dr. Stanford, as always, too. It was
Very
nice pleasure. Thank you. Can't wait to have you back for another episode, too.
Thanks for joining us on the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. If this episode inspired you to learn more about your health, please leave us a review and share the podcast with a friend. Your feedback helps spread the word about the power of precision medicine. Remember, taking action today can lead to a healthier tomorrow. See you next time.